Welcome to Stop the Noise, where small business specialists cut through the clutter to hone in on practical things small business owners can do to solve business challenges and move their business forward. In today's episode of Stop the Noise, host Brenda Thompson from the Better Business for Good company is talking with HR specialist Jessie Warne from HR Gurus and Katie Patterson from Katie Patterson HR Consulting about employment contracts, why you need them, and how to make sure they're good enough to protect you and your employees. You'll walk away with an executable checklist of things you can do right away to audit your current employment contracts. So let's get started. Jessie, I might kick off with asking you, why are employment contracts important for both employers and employees?
Thanks, Brenda. Well, employment contracts are really important for both parties because they provide both parties with the transparency around the terms and conditions of employment. So it makes it really clear around what the expectations are for both parties. So that's why they're super important to have them. You want that transparency, and they provide I like to say a legal line of defence should things go pear-shaped later on down the track.
And I suppose that legal line of defence applies to both parties as well.
100%.
It really does protect the business, the employer, and the employees.
Yeah. So if it's in black and white, it makes it a lot clearer than a verbal agreement.
Absolutely. No more handshakes of the past, So Katie, I'm going to throw this one at you, and I don't even know what this question means because it's what are the NES and does it matter? So what are NES?
Okay, so the NES, Jessie, great answer to that question. Well done. The NES is the National Employment Standards, which sort of sit along and are incorporated into the Australian law, regardless of any award that you may be on. And there are 11 of them, and you have to have or abide by all those 11 standards in order to have an agreement that is legal. And some of those things include annual leave, personal leave, parental leave, those kind of things. And the most recent one that's come on board is providing the option to casual employees after they've worked for a certain amount of time in your business on a regular basis, because we're transferring. We need, as employers, you need to offer casual employees an opportunity to become a permanent staff member.
So all of those things are going to have to be, those 11 things are going to have to be in your employment contract. So we're talking about those in the checklist? I'm guessing we are. Yeah. We will. Coming back to you, Jessie. And you particularly wanted to be asked the second half of this question, but what should you include and not include in a contract of employment? I know you wanted to be asked the second half of that question particularly.
Yeah. So, I mean, in an employment contract, you want to set out the terms and conditions. So how much is someone getting paid? When are they expected to be at work? Those types of things. But I would always say what not to include in a contract are things that may change. So things like your policies, or also like hot tip from me is if you've got bonus or incentive scheme, and that may change each year or, with the market conditions, don't refer to it in the contract, but don't have it in the contract. Your position description should not be in the contract. It can be referred to, but then you have the ability to change it. Whereas if it's sitting inside your contract, you're contractually bound to it, and it makes it really difficult, unless the employee agrees later down the track, to make any changes to it. So that's why you have your basic terms and conditions of employment in your contract of employment, but those things that are likely to change and be tweaked, you don't want them sitting as part of the contract, because then you're really limited in your ability to manage and change those things as you need to.
So you'd have it sort of referred to our current whatever and your current job description and that's a link out. Yeah, I get it. Okay.
And the other thing
might
be useful I think, to add on to what Jessie's saying, is that you can have generic clauses in your contract to say, you need to abide by policies and procedures which may be changed from time to time, and you need to agree with them. And then the other thing on your position description, you can use it as an attachment and just go refer attachment A or B or C or whatever. And then that can be changed and updated as a role evolves or changes with the business as well. So that could be a tip as well.
Nice one. The next introductory kind of question I had here, and I think we've started to talk about it really, is the benefits that an employment contract provides. Obviously, Jessie, at the very beginning, you talked about the kind of the security of knowing and the transparency for both parties. Do you want to expand on the benefits at all?
Well, I think without having an employment contract, it can get very murky. And I'm sure Katie's experienced this as well, where someone has, come back to the employer and said, hang on, you owe me X amount of money for all these breaks that I never took. And breaks weren't covered in the contract. And so, our first question will be, well, what does it say in your employment contract? We don't have one. Okay. So then we're going back to the award is your minimum, but if it's not in the contract, it's not transparent, it's not black and white, it's a lot of work later on, and it could result in, back payments. And really having it all set out in black and white, no one's ripping anybody off. It's just transparent. Here's what you get paid, and it's very clear. So the benefit is it keeps that relationship and the terms and conditions transparent, and everybody knows where they stand.
Which protects the relationship as well, doesn't it? Because when things aren't clear, it's really like a communication breakdown, but that gives you a really clear black and white on paper line of communication, so you don't end up with those kinds of communication breakdowns that end up being relationship breakdowns. Yeah. Katie, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, look, I think absolutely spot on. And I think Jessie probably has also seen this, is that you go into an award, whatever award it is, and there's a few hundred of them in this country, and they really aren't in plain English for people to understand really clearly. And it could be some clauses can be really interpreted quite differently if you didn't have the experience or the exposure to it. So that's where that employment contract would come in and say, this is what it means for us, and this is how we operate within that award.
Excellent.
Instead of reading 178 pages of an award, you might get 4 or 5 pages of an employment agreement. And
it's in plain English, we hope.
You would hope
the good ones are in plain
yes.
Hang on, is that in the checklist? Our employment contracts are in plain English.
Yeah, there's a lot of employment contracts I've seen that are, like, nothing against lawyers. I love them when I need them, but they're in lawyer speak, and so they're written by lawyers for lawyers, and they will help you eventually. But if the business owner can't understand what it says and the employees can't understand what it says, it's not very useful. So
and they're not going to deliver that clarity and transparency that was your main goal of having them. Yeah,
100%.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Katie, just to wrap up these introductory questions, do we have to have them with everybody, full-time, fixed-term, casual, contractors?
Look, my recommendation is yes, and I'm sure Jessie probably agrees with that, because people need to know, once again, that the outline of their role, their expectations, their duties, their responsibilities, how many hours they're going to be working, whether or not they're being paid, a casual loading rate, or how they are engaged. So full-time and part-time are permanent, so therefore you have to provide things like annual leave, personal leave, those things, long service accruals, if they do that. And then things like a fixed term can be for a certain period of time, and they might also accrue annual leave, but you've got something at the end. You've got an end point, you've got a start and an end point. Let's say I'm employing you on a 6-month fixed term
6-month fixed term,
contract
Katie. Oh, there she
to
is.
do this project will be X, Y, Z. So a 6-month project to say, you know, you need to achieve this, these are the expectations, X, Y, and Z. And at that time, we will terminate your contract. Your work will finish with us at that time. If not, we will speak to you a month before or 2 weeks before. Now, a casual is the same thing. You are engaged on a case-by-case or a shift-by-shift basis, and they don't accrue any entitlements because they have a loading on top of their rate, usually a 25% loading, and that needs to be spelt out to them in that employment contract. And it's very different. That employment contract is very different to a permanent contract, permanent employee contract. And then you go into the world of subcontractors, and we'll just touch on this ever so slightly. Subcontractor is not an employee. You are contracting them. They are supplying you with a service for a certain period of time or for a certain project, and do that. And you don't pay them. You pay them by invoice generally, and they have an ABN number. And it's like a supplier where you get your printing materials from, or somewhere like that. And however, the law states that they could be an employee if they go above certain, if they have certain entitlements. So you really need to be careful that your subcontractor or your independent contractor agreement is spelt out that they are not an employee and are not entitled to those things like annual leave, sick leave, and so forth.
And yeah, and interestingly, this year there was some High Court rulings on exactly what you're talking about, and it all comes down to the contract. So, you know, whether a person is an independent contractor or an employee will come down essentially to what's in that contract. So if you don't have one, you won't have a leg to stand on.
Yeah.
That's it. And then you'll be up for entitlement, superannuation, and that could be very, very costly to a business.
Okay. Well, I think it might be time we actually moved into the audit. That concludes the first part of today's session. Now it's time to open up the checklist, where Katie and Jessie will walk you step by step through an executable checklist of things you can do right away to audit your current contracts to ensure you, your business, and your employees are fully protected.